Now, the rest of the story. Just getting safely from one place to another in war-torn Bosnia's capital of Sarajevo is no small task. You heard about the official motorcade that ran into trouble over there? Somebody lobbed a bomb at one of the cars and it landed in the street instead. There was a lot of smoke and debris. About a dozen bystanders were injured, none seriously. The mayor of Sarajevo, riding in the lead car, was furious and frightened. The motorcade stopped at City Hall. There were speeches. Next on the schedule was the National Museum and the governor's residence. But the police commissioner and others in charge were wary after the morning's near miss. There must be, all agreed, a change of plans. Cancel the museum, somebody suggested. Others nodded. And better still, another advised to terminate the remainder of the schedule. The situation is simply too risky. It was Colonel Bardolph who, after listening to everyone, finally decided what should be done. The motorcade would proceed as planned, with one exception. At a prescribed intersection, the cars would split up, taking the most important of the VIPs in a direction that no terrorist could anticipate. The other authorities nodded. The motorcade resumed, but this is the rest of the story. Out there somewhere among the passers-by, a man is lurking, a man with a gun in his belt and murder on his mind. From his vantage point on Leitner Bridge, he can see up and down the boulevard. He knows the route the motorcade will take, a right turn on Franz Joseph Street. It is time. He must hurry there. And there he stands in front of Schiller's food shop, reaching furtively inside his clothing to touch the weapon that lies concealed therein. And then, right on schedule, according to plan, the motorcade turns down Franz Joseph Street. At that moment, an acquaintance walks up. "Did you hear about the bomb attack this morning?" he asks. Quite, in fact, the man with the gun had known beforehand. The bomb thrower was his co-conspirator, but he had failed. There was but one opportunity remaining here and now. The man with the gun looks up. The cars in the motorcade are passing in perfect order, just as everyone had anticipated. The man steps forward, drawing his pistol. He is no more than 5 feet from his target when he fires twice. 2 shots heard round the world 93 years ago today, June 28, 1914. For history recalls that then, in the Bosnian city, ripped apart by strife even still, a man named Gavrilo Princip emerged from a crowd and with a twitch of his finger plunged the planet into war, the First World War. And yet so far-reaching were the ramifications of the assassination that day that we have all but forgot. The car carrying the doomed Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was supposed to have turned the other way as the motorcade entered Franz Joseph Street. That was the change of plans. The Archduke's automobile followed the others, according to the original schedule, and World War I was ignited. Because for all of the carefully thought-out, much-discussed last-minute rearrangements, nobody told the one man who had to know, the Archduke Ferdinand's chauffeur. And now you know the rest of the story.
And now, the rest of the story. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne. In 1894, the Archduke fell in love with a commoner named Sophie Chotek. Now, she was a lady-in-waiting or a personal assistant to another female royal. Now, a royal marrying a commoner was not acceptable at the time. Despite the conflict within the imperial household, the Archduke was determined to marry Sophie. But the marriage was only allowed once the Archduke renounced his descendants' rights to the throne. In addition, Sophia would not share her husband's rank, title, precedence, or privileges, nor would she normally appear in public beside him. She was not allowed to sit in the royal box in theaters, and was not allowed to ride in the royal carriage. But there was one loophole. Sophie could enjoy the recognition of his rank and sit beside him when he was acting in a military capacity. For the Archduke and Sophie, their love meant more than anything else, and they were married on July the 1st, 1900, and she eventually was given the title Duchess of Hohenberg. In May 1911, a secret society called the Black Hand was established to create a greater Serbia through terrorist action. 2 years later, Emperor Franz Joseph, the Archduke's uncle, commanded the Archduke to observe the military maneuvers in Bosnia the following summer. After the maneuvers, the Archduke was to visit Sarajevo to open the State Museum there. Sophie ultimately decided to accompany the Archduke out of fear for his safety. Now remember that loophole? Because the Archduke was observing military maneuvers, Sophie could walk beside him, sit beside him, and ride beside him. The Black Hand had considered several targets for assassination and had sent an assassin to kill, well, not the Archduke, but the governor of Bosnia. While traveling on a train from France to Bosnia, the police began searching the train for a thief. The assassin thought the police were searching for him and threw his weapons, a dagger and a bottle of poison, into the toilet. Once in Bosnia, the assassin contacted his superiors, but by then they had learned of the Archduke's planned visit and thought he would be a far more important target. But there was another plot to assassinate the Archduke by a student revolutionary group known as Young Bosnia. To members of Young Bosnia, attacking an imperial official was seen as the ultimate act of heroism. At least 7 people, including Gavrilo Princip, were in on the assassination plot. One of the members of the plot gave the assassins Fabrique Nationale Model 1910 .380 caliber automatic pistols, 6 hand grenades, money, suicide pills, maps, and provided them with training. On Sunday morning, June 28, 1914, the 6 assassins got into their pre-planned positions along the motorcade route. 6 automobiles were in that motorcade. The Archduke and Sophie rode together with the governor of Bosnia in the 3rd car. This is the car they rode in on that fateful day, a 1911 Graf and Stift double phaeton with its convertible top folded down. Just before 10 a.m., the motorcade's first stop was for a brief inspection of a military barracks. At 10 o'clock, the motorcade left the barracks and headed for the Sarajevo town hall. The motorcade passed the first assassin, who was armed with a bomb, but he failed to act. The motorcade passed the second assassin, who was armed with a pistol and a bomb. He too failed to act. At 10:10, the motorcade passed the third assassin. He threw his bomb, but it bounced off of the folded back convertible top and landed in the street. It exploded under the car immediately behind the one carrying the Archduke and Sophie. Around 20 people were injured. Kabrinovich, the assassin who threw the bomb, swallowed his cyanide pill and jumped into the Miljacka River. That should have been the end of Kabrinovich, but there were 2 problems. The cyanide pill was old and only induced vomiting, and due to a hot and dry summer, the river was only about 5 inches deep. Kabrinovich was quickly arrested. The 5 remaining cars in the motorcade sped towards the town hall, past the other assassins who failed to act. At the reception at the town hall, the mayor was delivering a speech when the Archduke, who was visibly shaking, interrupted. "Mr. Mayor," he protested, "I came here on a visit and I am greeted with bombs. It is outrageous." Duchess Sophie whispered something into his ear and the Archduke allowed the mayor to continue his speech. The Archduke had prepared a speech, but it was traveling in the car under which the bomb exploded. When it was finally delivered to the Archduke, it was still wet with blood. Following the reception, officials and members of the Archduke's party discussed their options. Finally, they decided to abandon the remainder of their plans for the day and decided to visit the wounded from the bombing at the hospital. At 10:45, Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Duchess Sophie got back into the 3rd car in the motorcade along with the governor and headed toward the hospital. This was the last known photo taken of the Archduke and Sophie. As Mr. Harvey explained, no one told the driver that the motorcade would split up at the Latin Bridge. When Principe learned that the bomb had failed to kill the Archduke, he positioned himself in front of Schiller's Deli near Latin Bridge. At 10:50, he watched as the motorcade quickly approached and turned right at Latin Bridge. He thought his chance had passed him by. The governor yelled at the driver that he was going the wrong way. The driver applied the brakes, put the car into reverse, and let off the clutch. The car stalled right in front of Principe. This gave him the perfect opportunity. He stepped from the crowd and onto the running board of the car. He pulled this pistol and fired twice at point-blank range. The first bullet struck the Archduke in the jugular vein, and the second struck Sophie in the abdomen. Principe tried to shoot himself, but he was seized and arrested. Sophie lost consciousness immediately. The driver restarted the car and sped to the governor's residence for medical treatment. Archduke Franz Ferdinand cried, "Sophie, Sophie, don't die! Live for our children!" Then he began repeating the phrase, "It is nothing, it is nothing, it is nothing," until he lost consciousness. By the time they reached the governor's mansion, Sophie was dead. Archduke Franz Ferdinand died 10 minutes later. Remember earlier I said that Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Duchess Sophie were of a different social standing, different social classes, he being a royal, she a commoner? Even after being married to the Archduke for 14 years, bearing his children and dying by his side, the Archduke and Duchess Sophie were buried at Arstetten Castle because the Duchess could not be buried in the imperial crypt. As Mr. Harvey explained, the assassination directly led to World War I, but its influence lasted for decades. In 1930, a marble plaque commemorating Gavrilo Princip and the assassination was erected at the site. Following the 1941 German invasion of Yugoslavia during World War II, German troops removed the monument and gave it as a 52nd birthday present to Hitler. There is much to learn from the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Duchess Sophie. Princip murder of two people led to the deaths of somewhere between 15 to 20 million people during World War I. Germany was on the losing side of that war, which led to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the deadliest conflict in human history, World War II. In that war, somewhere between 50 and 80 million people died. It's no stretch. Princip's two shots ultimately led to the deaths of between 65 and 100 million people. Violence is never the answer. This is the best example there can ever be that violence only begets violence. I'm Brad Dison. Thanks for watching. And now you know the rest of the story.